Christmas Day, 1929. In the quiet rural town of Germantown, North Carolina, the Lawson family was preparing for a holiday celebration unlike any other. The scent of fresh-baked pies filled the air, laughter echoed through the farmhouse, and gifts lay wrapped beneath the Christmas tree. But by the time the sun had set, the house would be silent. The tree, now bloodstained, and the once happy home would become the site of one of the most horrific family massacres in American history. At first glance, Charlie Lawson was a devoted husband and father. A hard-working tobacco farmer, he had recently come into some money, enough to take his family of 9 into town for a special holiday treat, a family portrait dressed in their Sunday best. It was a rare indulgence for a working-class family in the 1920s, and neighbors remarked that Charlie seemed eager to capture this perfect moment. But in hindsight, the image seemed more like a grim farewell. Because hours later, on the most joyous day of the year, Charlie Lawson would slaughter his wife and 6 of their 7 children, leaving behind a crime so shocking that it still haunts the town nearly a century later. The Lawson family was well-liked, though Charlie had a reputation for being a strict and brooding man. His wife, Fanny, was known for her kindness, and their children, Marie, Arthur, Carrie, Mabel, James, Raymond, and baby Mary Lou, were as lively as any kids growing up on a farm. Christmas morning started as usual. Marie, the eldest daughter at 17, was busy baking a cake that would later be found untouched on the dining room table, covered in a thin layer of dust from the violence that would soon follow. No one could have predicted what came next. Sometime in the afternoon, Charlie sent his eldest son, Arthur, on an errand to town. This would save Arthur's life, but he had no way of knowing that as he left the farmhouse that day, he was saying goodbye to his entire family. Once Arthur was gone, Charlie picked up his shotgun. Carrie, 12, and Mabel, 7, were heading out to visit a nearby relative when Charlie intercepted them near the barn. Without hesitation, he raised his shotgun and fired. The echo of the blast shattered the stillness of the winter air. One after the other, the 2 girls fell into the cold earth, their bodies limp in the snow. Charlie wasn't finished. Methodically, he bent down and bludgeoned their lifeless bodies, ensuring there was no chance of survival. Then, eerily calm, he dragged their bodies into the barn, hiding them from sight before turning his attention back to the house. Inside, Fanny must have heard the gunshots, but she never had a chance to react. As she stepped onto the porch, Charlie took aim and pulled the trigger. She collapsed instantly. From inside, Marie screamed. The younger children clung to each other, their innocent minds unable to process what was happening. But Charlie wasn't finished yet. He stepped over his wife's lifeless body and entered the house. Marie, frozen in terror, was next. The 17-year-old barely had time to move before her father shot her point-blank in the chest. As she crumpled to the floor, her younger siblings, James, 4, and Raymond, 2, began sobbing. One by one, Charlie turned his gun on his remaining children, ensuring each of them met the same fate. He moved without hesitation, without remorse, killing them with a brutal efficiency that suggested this massacre had been planned long before Christmas morning. Finally, only one person remained, baby Mary Lou, barely 4 months old. Perhaps, for a fleeting moment, Charlie hesitated. But whatever twisted darkness had taken hold of him did not let go. He bludgeoned the infant to death, her tiny body no match for his unforgiving hands. When the horror was over, Charlie carefully arranged the bodies, folding their arms across their chests, as if preparing them for burial. Then he walked out into the woods. As the sun began to set, neighbors started to notice the eerie stillness of the Lawson house. The silence was unnatural. The smoke that should have been curling from the chimney was absent. Something was wrong. Then a single gunshot rang out from the woods. It would be hours before a search party ventured into the dense trees, following the sound of a lone, distant gunshot. And there, beneath a towering oak tree, they found Charlie Lawson's lifeless body. He had propped himself against the trunk, a shotgun in his hands, a bullet through his skull. Scattered around him were footprints, pacing in circles, suggesting that before pulling the trigger, Charlie had spent hours wandering through the woods, perhaps battling his demons, perhaps reconsidering what he had done. Beside his body lay two eerie notes, scrawled on scraps of paper. One read, "Blame nobody but I." The other simply said, "Troubles can cause." The town was left in shock. Why had Charlie Lawson killed his family? Some speculated he had suffered a mental breakdown, that financial worries or a hidden illness had driven him to commit such an atrocity. Others whispered darker rumors, that Charlie had been hiding a terrible family secret, that Marie had been pregnant with his child. Some even claimed he had planned the murders months in advance, pointing to the bizarre family portrait taken shortly before the massacre, as if Charlie had wanted to immortalize his family before he destroyed it. But the truth? The truth died with Charlie that Christmas night. To this day, the house where the massacre took place is rumored to be haunted. Some say that on cold December nights, you can still hear the cries of the Lawson children, their laughter forever silenced by the father who was supposed to protect them. And in the center of town, in an old display case, sits Marie's Christmas cake, preserved for nearly a century, untouched and uneaten, a chilling reminder of the Christmas that turned into a nightmare. But what if this wasn't just the act of a madman? What if someone, or something, had driven Charlie Lawson to kill? Because as investigators took a final look around the crime scene, they discovered something chilling tucked inside Charlie's pocket, a note that no one was ever meant to read. The bloodstained forest was silent, save for the murmur of stunned voices. Sheriff John Taylor knelt beside Charlie Lawson's lifeless body, his hands trembling as he carefully unfolded the crumpled scrap of paper found in the dead man's pocket. "Blame nobody but I." The sheriff frowned. This note had been reported earlier, scrawled on a torn piece of paper beside Charlie's body. But this was different, the handwriting messy, the ink smudged as if it had been written in a hurry. "Troubles can cause." The same ominous phrase from before. But at the bottom of this note, in barely legible writing, were three final words. "More to come." Sheriff Taylor's throat went dry. More to come? What the hell did that mean? And then the body moved. Not Charlie's, but something inside his coat pocket stirred. A deputy gasped and stumbled backward as a torn piece of fabric fluttered onto the forest floor. A small, delicate scrap of cloth, stained with blood. Someone grabbed a lantern, bringing the light closer. As the yellow glow illuminated the fabric, the sheriff's stomach lurched. It was a piece of an infant's dress, and it didn't belong to baby Mary Lou. A twisted investigation. Back at the Lawson home, the investigation had turned chaotic. Word of the massacre had spread like wildfire, and by the time authorities arrived, curious townsfolk were already picking through the crime scene. People whispered theories. Had Charlie gone mad? Had the devil himself possessed him? But one rumor stood out among the rest. According to a local shopkeeper, Charlie had been acting strangely in the weeks before Christmas. He had visited town multiple times, asking odd questions about cemeteries and burial plots. He asked me if a grave could be dug deep enough to hide more than one body, the shopkeeper confessed. I thought he was just joking. Now I'm not so sure. Fueled by this revelation, the sheriff ordered a full sweep of the Lawson property. By nightfall, the search turned up something disturbing, an abandoned well, hidden in the woods behind the farmhouse. As officers peered down into the dark hole, a nauseating stench of decay hit them. One officer gagged, another turned away, and then, deep in the shadows of the well, something glistened. A small white shoe. The sheriff ordered the well to be drained immediately. But by the time investigators returned the next morning, something had changed. The shoe was gone. The sheriff's blood ran cold. Had someone been here overnight? Who else knew about this site? And would have been down there? As if things weren't strange enough, the coroner made a chilling statement. The infant, Mary Lou, her injuries don't match the others. The town doctor had noted severe bruising on Mary Lou's chest and neck, wounds inconsistent with blunt force trauma. It's almost as if she was suffocated. A new horror gripped the sheriff. Had Charlie killed his own child in a different way? Or had someone else done it after the massacre? By now, news of the Lawson murders had reached the national press. Newspapers across the country labeled it the Christmas Day Massacre, branding Charlie as a deranged killer who had inexplicably snapped. But some locals weren't convinced. Rumors swirled that Charlie had uncovered a dark family secret, one that drove him to madness. The most disturbing rumor came from a neighbor who claimed that, weeks before the murders, Marie, Charlie's 17-year-old daughter, confessed something terrible to a friend. She said she had a secret, one that would ruin the whole family, the neighbor whispered, and that she was scared of her own father. Then, the case took a horrifying turn. A local preacher came forward with a confession from a dying man. "I know what happened to the Lawsons," the man rasped. "I know because I was there." Sheriff Taylor leaned in, his breath caught in his throat. Charlie wasn't the only killer that night. The room fell deathly silent. Before the sheriff could press him for more details, the old man's breath hitched, and he was gone. Who was this mysterious informant? What did he mean by Charlie wasn't the only killer? And most terrifying of all, if Charlie wasn't working alone, was the other murderer still out there? Sheriff John Taylor stood frozen, his mind racing. The dying man's words still rang in his ears. Charlie wasn't the only killer that night. The room felt suffocating. Who was this man? How did he know what had really happened? And if he was telling the truth, then the real nightmare was far from over. The preacher, visibly shaken, cleared his throat. "That man knew something. I could see it in his eyes," he said. Sheriff Taylor ran a hand over his face. Had they all been wrong about Charlie? He had slaughtered his wife and 6 children before taking his own life. Or at least, that was what everyone believed. But if someone else had been involved, then that meant the real story had yet to be uncovered. The next morning, the sheriff arrived at the Lawson home, now abandoned, save for a few morbid onlookers still milling about the property. The crime scene had turned into a macabre tourist attraction. People whispered about ghosts, cursed land, and the devil himself. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Blood still stained the wooden floorboards. The Christmas cake, untouched since that fateful day, sat perfectly preserved on the table, a sickening reminder of a celebration that never came. The sheriff didn't believe in curses, but something about this place felt wrong. He wandered through the house, stopping at Marie Lawson's bedroom. On her dresser, a photograph was partially buried beneath a pile of papers. It was a family portrait, the same one Charlie had insisted they take just days before the massacre. But something was off. As the sheriff studied it, his stomach twisted. Someone's face had been scratched out. Sheriff Taylor immediately took the photo to Dr. Coble, the town doctor, who had examined the victims. He compared it to his notes. "Look here," the sheriff said, pointing. "This face, it's been removed on purpose." "But who was it?" Dr. Coble squinted. Hard to say, but he hesitated. "You know, there was a strange rumor about Marie before the murders." The sheriff tensed. "Another secret?" "Some say she was pregnant," Dr. Coble said, "and that the father was someone she feared." Sheriff Taylor felt a chill creep up his spine. Had Charlie found out? Had that discovery led to the massacre? Or worse, was the father of Marie's unborn child the second killer? The sheriff wasn't the only one digging for answers. In town, a former neighbor of the Lawsons had been speaking too freely. She had gone to the local grocer and whispered something shocking. "I heard Marie and her mother whispering in the barn one night," she had said. She was crying. She said she knew something terrible was going to happen. But before the sheriff could track the neighbor down, she vanished. Her home was abandoned. Her belongings were still inside. But the woman herself? Gone. No one saw her leave. No one saw her pack. It was as if she had never existed. Determined to find more answers, the sheriff returned to the crime scene that night. He moved through the property with a lantern, searching for anything that might have been overlooked. And that's when he noticed something buried beneath the porch. Half sticking out of the dirt was a crumpled, yellowed envelope. He carefully retrieved it, brushing away the soil. The name on it made his heart stop. Marie. With shaking hands, he opened the letter and read, "I know the truth, but I can't say it. I'm scared of him. He said he would kill us all. I told Mama, but she said we had to keep quiet. But now I hear him at night. I hear him walking outside my window. If something happens to me, please remember what I said." The sheriff's pulse pounded. Who was Marie afraid of? Who had been watching her at night? And the bigger question, was that person still out there? The sheriff rushed back to town, determined to re-examine everything. Who was Marie's secret connected to? Who had a reason to keep her silent? That's when he thought back to something the old preacher had said before the confession. Some sins are buried deep, but they never stay buried forever. Sheriff Taylor's eyes widened. The well, the abandoned well where they had seen the shoe. He gathered his men and returned to the dark, gaping hole in the earth. The air smelled rotten, and something in his gut told him they weren't alone. They lowered a lantern, and that's when they saw it. Bones. Small, broken bones. And beside them, barely visible in the flickering light, a second shotgun. It wasn't Charlie's. Someone else had been there. Someone else had killed that night. And whoever they were, they had gotten away with murder. Sheriff John Taylor stood at the edge of the well, staring into the darkness below. The bones, the shotgun, the undeniable evidence that Charlie Lawson had not acted alone. As the grim discovery spread through town, panic took hold. If someone else had helped commit the murders, that meant they were still out there, walking among them. Whispers slithered through the streets. Who had a secret to keep? Who had a reason to silence Marie? And most chilling of all, who would kill again to make sure the truth stayed buried? The sheriff wasn't the only one shaken by the discovery. That night, Mrs. Ethel Johnson, a widow who lived just down the road from the old Lawson farm, swore she saw someone lurking outside her house. A shadowy figure, standing just beyond the reach of her lantern, watching, waiting. When she called out, the figure vanished into the trees. The next morning, she found something chilling on her doorstep, a single shotgun shell. Determined to finally unmask the second killer, the sheriff had the old shotgun from the well examined. The serial number traced back to a local hardware store. Records showed it had been purchased just days before the murders, by none other than Charlie's brother, Elijah Lawson. The town had long considered Elijah to be the good brother, a quiet man who had moved away years ago. He hadn't even been in town when the massacre happened, or so they thought. Sheriff Taylor wasted no time tracking down Elijah, who now lived in a neighboring county. When confronted with the evidence, Elijah's hands shook, his eyes darting toward the door. I wasn't there, he stammered. I left town before Christmas. But the sheriff wasn't convinced. A local farmhand had recently told authorities that he'd seen a man matching Elijah's description near the Lawson farm 2 nights before the murders. And then there was Marie's letter. I told Mama, but she said we had to keep quiet. But now I hear him at night. I hear him walking outside my window. Had Elijah been the one watching Marie? As the sheriff pressed harder, Elijah's face twisted in panic. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. You don't understand. His hands trembled. Charlie found out the truth, and I had to stop him. The sheriff's blood ran cold. Elijah took a breath, his eyes glistening with something close to fear. You think I'm a monster? His voice cracked. Charlie was the one who got Marie pregnant. The sheriff reeled. Had Charlie killed his family to hide his darkest sin? Or had Elijah, in some twisted act of vengeance, decided to wipe out the whole family himself? There was only one way to get the truth. Elijah was arrested that night, but before the sheriff could get a full confession, a fire broke out in the jailhouse. By the time the flames were under control, Elijah was gone. The only thing left behind was a hole in the back wall, and a single, blood-stained note nailed to the sheriff's desk. Some sins are never forgiven. The town never saw Elijah again. Some believe he escaped into the mountains, living in the shadows for the rest of his days. Others whispered that Charlie's ghost had come back to take revenge on his brother. But what no one could explain was this. For years after Elijah's disappearance, people swore they saw him. A tall, gaunt figure standing in the woods near the old Lawson farm. Always watching, always waiting. And then, he was gone. Elijah Lawson vanished into the night, leaving behind only the eerie, blood-stained note. Some sins are never forgiven. The fire at the jailhouse had destroyed most of the sheriff's records, erasing much of the evidence that could have tied Elijah to the massacre. For weeks, authorities searched the nearby forests, sending out bloodhounds and posses of armed men. But it was as if Elijah had disappeared into thin air. The town of Germantown fell into a state of unease. Doors were locked before nightfall, windows sealed shut against the ghost of a killer who might still be out there. Then, reports began trickling in. Hunters claimed to see a gaunt figure lurking at the tree line, watching them from the shadows. A farmer swore that one morning he found the words, "I know the truth," scratched into the frost on his barn door. And then, one chilling account from a young girl who claimed that on Christmas Eve the following year, a man with hollow eyes had knocked on their door, asking for a place to rest. When her father refused and shut the door, the man left behind a shotgun shell on the porch. Elijah Lawson was never seen again. With Elijah gone, the case against him unraveled. The sheriff had suspicions, but little physical proof. Charlie Lawson was still viewed as the sole culprit, and many believe the case should have been put to rest. But some, including Sheriff Taylor, were never satisfied. Marie's letter, the shotgun bought before the murders, the footsteps outside her window. Had Elijah been stalking the Lawson family long before Christmas Day? Or had he killed them to silence a secret that would have destroyed them all? Despite the town's desire to move on, the legend of the Lawson Family Massacre never faded. Some claimed that the spirits of the murdered family still haunted the abandoned farmstead. For decades, people visited the property, leaving behind Christmas wreaths and candles in remembrance. But those who stayed too long spoke of something else. The sound of footsteps crunching through the frozen leaves when no one was there. A shadowy figure moving among the trees. And on the anniversary of the murders, some even claimed to hear a shotgun blast echoing through the hills. After the massacre, the Lawson home became a gruesome tourist attraction. Morbid curiosity seekers traveled from all over to see where the killings had taken place. Bloodstains still marked the wooden floorboards. Marie's half-finished Christmas cake sat untouched on the kitchen table, left as it was on the day she died. People paid to walk through the house, some swearing they could still feel a presence watching them. But the house's most terrifying relic? Charlie Lawson's rocking chair. More than one visitor claimed to have seen it moving on its own, rocking slowly, back and forth, until, finally, the house was torn down in an attempt to erase the memory of what had happened. But the ghosts? They remained. To this day, historians and true crime investigators debate the truth behind the Lawson family murders. Was it simply a father driven mad by financial stress and hidden shame? Or was there something darker, something the town was too afraid to face? And then, there's the final, most chilling question of all. If Elijah Lawson wasn't responsible for the massacre, why did he run? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most chilling true crime cases, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Do you think Elijah was guilty, or was there another secret lurking in the Lawson family? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.